Thank you so much, as I say, for being back so quickly. Our final moderator for the day is Erin Andrews. She is an AISTS graduate with over a decade of professional experience in the Canadian sport industry and technology and design sectors, with a strong passion for empowering women and shaping a more equitable future for sport. Please welcome our final moderator, Erin Andrews.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the final session of the day, which is assessing impact of sport events. And we will dive into today the key factors to success. So conducting impact assessments for sporting events provides valuable insights for all stakeholders, including international federations and host cities. Today, we will be diving into impact studies, unpacking who conducts these assessments, why they're crucial to the industry, and the types of impact they measure, from economic to environmental, social, and media. We have an expert panel joining us today. Joining me on stage is Dr. Giovanni Battista Derci. He is the Assistant Professor of Control Management at the EHL Business School. We're also joined by Gergi Marcus, Sport Director, World Triathlon. And shortly on stage, we will be joined by Anthony Brenneman, who is joining us from sunny California. Anthony is the Executive Director of the Orange County Sports Commission. Now, to start us off, I will be passing the mic over to Dr. Derci. As I mentioned, Dr. Giovanni Battista Derci is the Assistant Professor of Management Control at EHL Hospitality Business School, and he's also a member of the AISTS Scientific Committee. His research interests are in the fields of performance evaluation, measurement and reporting of social environmental performance with a specific focus on sport events. Giovanni, please join us on stage. Thank you so much.
So, good afternoon, everybody. So it's a real pleasure to be here. I know it's the last session for you today, so it will be relatively tough to follow. So this is basically probably the second hardest challenge for the people presenting here today. Maybe the first hardest challenge for the people being here early morning, or anyway breaking the ice, right? So for me, it's just to closing this part, and after also for what we're gonna see all together. Then let's start by discussing a little bit about impact assessment. This is something that has been a little bit, we know it, let me say, that we have discussed about this issue, public discuss about this issue, experts discuss about this measurement, the importance of measurement since now multiple years. But we try today to have a look at the role of impact assessment through a different angles, hoping to give you a little bit some different, let me say, understand a little bit better the role of impact measurement and assessment for sport organization, and also the pitfalls behind the impact measurement. The premise that I like to typically use while introducing impact measurement are based on scientific evidence. Over the years, we have assisted historically to a continuous growth of event size. The continuous growth can be measured across multiple dimensions. There is a very interesting study from colleagues from the University of Lausanne who show that if you consider dimensions such as number of spectators, the number of sport disciplines, the media coverage, broadcasting revenues and broadcasting reach, and cost, okay, expenditure needed to implement events, we can observe an exponential growth over the period. But we also know that this growth, especially looking at the cost part, has brought attention to issues public concern, public issues, such as how can we use this money in a good way, considering the fact that large events like Olympic Games and World Cups, FIFA World Cups, for instance, basically are among the largest projects on Earth. And not only they require resources, but they also create large impact. Impact that can be negative, but also positive. And I have highlighted the negative part especially as first, because of course this create the large, let me say, matter of preoccupation for society. Now, this has led to what? To issues that have created multiple things, such as increasing public concern, as we said, but also the rising question whether the money that has been used to deliver these basically mega events could be used maybe differently for other purposes. And therefore, we even have assisted to fewer cities being able to bid for hosting such an event. Therefore, the key consequence of this is actually that from a scientific point of view, we don't only have to talk about the size using the dimension that I've just mentioned, but probably we also have to consider a new dimension, which is not new, as we said from the beginning, which is the dimension of impact. But the problem of impact nowadays is actually that the positive or negative impact has become nowadays a must, something that we must tackle for multiple reasons. And here I give you basically different angle to look at the importance of impact. Think about this. The investment, or anyway, any effort that we do on environmental activities, so activities that try to reduce the impact on the environment, any marginal increment that we produce in terms of environmental effort may have a huge impact today, considering the climate urgency that we are living. And I call this in economic terms that the marginal value of environmental effort now is at the highest level, both negative and positive. Therefore, not only the marginal value of action, but also the marginal value of inaction can create huge negative problems, negative consequences. Similar thing for, let me say, the financial aspect of events. Think about expenditures like capital expenditure or operating expenditures, CapEx, OpEx. These expenditures are more and more under discussion, and because there are opportunity costs that can reflect better ways to use this money. Now, organizers of events are asked more and more to use money wisely, to look at the return on this investment, because we must be efficient in delivering the games while using economic resources. This is another constraint that make particularly challenging to create economic impact. Third element is the greater marginal value also of social initiatives. Let me say, if we consider the industry, or sport event industry, the pressure from society to act towards social initiative has been, over the last year, has been increasing exponentially. This means that investing or anyway acting in initiatives become a must, but also create great marginal value associated to this. The same thing can be applied to inaction. And finally, social license. Social license is a concept that says, basically looks at the perception that stakeholders may have on an organization activity. If an organization is conducting its activity right, in a right way, in an adequate way, in a let me say, trustworthy way. And so this has become way important, more and more important over the years. And social license is now a key to have the legitimacy to keep operating. Having said that, the question now for managers is where to put their attention. Their attention, therefore, should be, of course, on the size of organization, but also on the impact. And the question would be how we can, let's say, maximize the impact or anyway manage the impact. And in order to manage the impact, we need to rely, which is also the object, which is the real object of this conversation today, on good, rigorous measurement. Because if we don't measure, of course, it's very difficult to manage. Okay, this is a little bit the principle, and also, let me say, behind this presentation, but also what is behind my background, as I am a professor of management control, management accounting, therefore measurement. Okay. Then, what do we need to measure impact? We need a little bit a different approach, which is a dynamic and holistic approach. That means two components. First component, dynamic, refers to a time frame. The time frame means that we need to enlarge our evaluation scope in terms of period. We need to start to evaluate the impact from the bidding phase, going through the delivery of the game, so the competition, up to post-event. 3 years after the event, 5 years after the event, as legacy should be produced. Anyway, positive, negative should be produced, negative legacy should be avoided, right? But on this is the first dimension, temporal dimension, dynamic dimension, but also we must consider the, let me say, the key pillars, object of analysis, which are the three classical dimensions that typically are considered to capture the interest of multiple stakeholders, because this is what impact is about, is impacting the interest or anyway the benefit or the creating negative effect to stakeholders. And in this sense, we typically must consider three dimensions. Economic dimension, which is a fundamental dimension, as if we don't have enough financial resources, we do not have the capability to deliver games, to deliver good competition, effective competition, successful competitions. But also we don't have resources to invest in environmental initiatives and in social initiatives, which are the other two dimensions of impact. Now, a good balance between these three dimensions is what we might consider being in line with a sustainable development, sustainable conduction of an event, or anyway, sustainable managing of an organization, if you want to transpose this to an organizational level. The next step is to, okay, we got the key principle, but how can we measure? What needs to measure in more specific term? Now, you know that there are several frameworks that have been developed over the years. Quite recently, the OECD, actually, they did an effort to try to gather all evidence associated with impact measurement and assessment, and to put all together in a unique guidance that really can help sport organization and also cultural and educational organization to generate and to conduct very good sustainable events, sport events, in the case of talking about sport events. Now, here you have just the proposed framework that is proposed by the OECD, and you see that reflect the three dimensions that we have discussed: economic, social, environmental. We do not have much time to go into the specific indicators. I just invite you to have a look in the case you want to enter into detail. But I want to highlight two things about the proposed framework that you have here. You may also find other framework, but what is important that you try to capture the dimension that I mentioned before, that is the three dimension, environmental, economic, and social, and also a time approach, a dynamic approach. But then each organization must also customize indicators based on the specific need of management attention of anyway activities that that organization intend to conduct, intend to do. And then another point I want to highlight is also important to see what the organization, in this case, this framework, do in terms of align this indicator with the SDG goals. That gives, as we know, a broader framework for compliance to identify whether we are going into, let me say, a common right direction. This helps us to create coherence, and we know that we are in a moment, we live in a period where we are literally bombarded of information, and having coherence help to put order in what we are doing, to make people understanding better, to communicate better with stakeholders. Then there is also other few points that I want to highlight. One is the importance of impact measurement for whom. The impact measurement is important for all stakeholders. So if you want to, and you can basically make this very short exercise of identifying what are the key stakeholders of a sport event or any way of an organization, you realize the importance of impact measurement for any type of stakeholders and the interest that these stakeholders may have on having a rigorous impact measurement and therefore a good communication also around this. And there are here, just I want to highlight a point also, if you just consider the perspective of think about organizers, think about public authorities that host, city that host event, or think about right owners. They are the one that have a direct interest in good impact measurement for multiple reasons, including communication, including ensuring long-term orientation to their activity, even attracting more events, let me say, more cities that can bid for more events. To conclude, two more slides that really go a little bit more in practical elements that may help organizations to deliver a rigorous impact measurement. Now, how can we perform an impact measurement which is rigorous? A few elements we must consider. First, we need a coherent scope that is defined. Whenever we talk about scope, we talk about the geographical territory. Impact must be measured in relation to a territory where the impact is generated. A period, reference period, we said that we must use a dynamic approach. Key actors involved. Then, and of course, the scope in terms of, as we said, economic, environmental, and social. They use this selection of smart indicators, specific, measurable, achievable, timely, and of course, reliable. I was forgetting the R. Then we must, of course, identify a measurement process that help people, owners of this process, to gather data, to measure, analyze, to interpret this data. But then you also need implementation of planning and management control systems, such as long-term plans, goals, setting, budget, accountability system, performance evaluation, rewarding. So if you set up a full planning and control cycle around impact, you can learn how to manage and maximize impact. You need to give people in your organization responsibility to deliver impact in multiple ways and with the right tools. Focus on the governance aspect is also another key ingredient, as governance is probably among the key drivers of delivering impact. Governance is where the key decisions are made. A good governance should be aligned with the idea of having impact as a top priority, institutionalized, integrated at the top of the organization. And then long-term orientation to balance short-term action. So long-term investment, long-term decisions, but also balance with short-term actions and results that must be performed, achieved. Finally, last slide. Another element which is relatively practically and it is useful to understand what we must do in order to be effective in impact measurement. Impact measurement is useful, but we must also to communicate impact in the right way. We know that stakeholder action are essential to deliver impact. So a sport organization alone cannot deliver much impact without the help, the contribution of its stakeholders. In order to have stakeholders being involved, we need to engage with them in an appropriate way. And the first way to engage is to communicate with them, to dialogue with them in a specific, easy, clear, transparent way. That's where sustainability report, sorry, not sustainability, I can call it in this way because, of course, it encompasses the 3 dimensions, but impact reporting becomes crucial, essential. As we need a transparent and comprehensive way to dialogue with our stakeholders. We need established standards that help having things being verified also, and credibility of what we communicate. And we need also specific language, not boilerplate type of languages that just create confusion. And as I said, also just mentioned, probably also external verification that can help to ensure that what we have produced in terms of impact is reliable, is rigorous. This was the last slide. So I thank you for the attention that you had already on this part. And I will be very happy then to push this conversation also with all of you and the panelists in a bit. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dr. Dauci. Now, we will begin the panel discussion. As mentioned, we are joined here to my right by Gergely Marcus, who is the Sport Director of World Triathlon, and we will be also joined online by Anthony Brennan, who I believe is here. Hi, Anthony. Welcome. Beautiful.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hi,
Nice
how
to
are
see
you?
everybody.
Can you hear us okay?
Yep.
Brilliant. Anthony, we'll start with you. For our audience, can you please describe your role as the executive director at Orange County Sport Commission and why sport events are so important for the development of your region?
Sure, absolutely. So it's nice to meet everybody, long-term attendee of the conference. Sorry I could not be there this week, but nonetheless, just wanted to talk to everybody today about Orange County in particular. As I mentioned, though, with Orange County, it's probably the most popular county in the world. When people think of Orange County, they think of usually the movies and the TV shows that have come out of there. But sports is very much part of our identity as well. Those sports can go all the way back to the famous Anaheim Mighty Ducks, all the way to Angels in the Outfield, which was also a Disney movie for those looking at 90s nostalgia. So when it comes to sporting events that we're bringing in, for the longest time, we've always kind of been lumped in with Los Angeles. because of our close proximity. But as a lot of people know, we're our own brand, we're our own identity. So with the start of our sports commission about 4 years ago, we're really using sports as a platform to express a mission. And that mission, comes in a lot of different ways, as we just heard in the recent presentation, which is anything from economic, social, and cultural, and environmental too, as well, given the state that we're in California. So it is tremendously important that we look at all of those different aspects to influence what we're doing here in Orange County. And the last thing I'll say too is, compared to some of our competitors, the county's made up of 34 different cities, and each of those cities has its own unique identity, but none of them have probably as strong of a brand as the county does. But we do see sports as a way for people to learn about those different communities, such as Huntington Beach, Anaheim, Newport Beach, Mesa, et cetera, and really putting us there on a platform to market ourselves in those destinations.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that introduction and providing us with a regional perspective on today's discussion. Gergely, can you please describe your role as sport director at World Triathlon and explain how much focus of your position is on finding and assessing hosts for major triathlon events?
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. I'm the sport director from World Triathlon, and my team in the sport department, we are in charge of all the events, technical officials, etc., results. So it's quite diverse, but a big part of our job, and directly as well, my job is the bidding process, and especially for the major events. What we have, I really invite my colleague from World Athletics that they have a section or a department just dealing with bidding. We have to do it within the sport department, but more or less we are trying to follow, and we are following the similar steps what they do, which is a never-ending story, and of course always keeps coming back, and have a big focus on that.
Great. I'll take it back to Anthony just for a moment here. Actually, this will be a question that I hope to gain both of your perspectives on. But Anthony, as a part of your role, you commission impact assessment studies. Can you explain to us why you are doing so and why it is important to invest in this work? And if you're also able to expand, you had mentioned that there's so many cities in your county. Are there specific types of impact assessments that, from economic, social, environment, that really resonate specifically with your stakeholders? And that could be leadership stakeholders or taxpayers as stakeholders. If you could provide some insight.
Absolutely. So I probably have to start off with going at the 30,000 foot level, which is the state. And a lot of that trickles down then to the counties as well as the different cities that we're in. So the West Coast, as we call it, is a lot different than the rest of the US, specifically California, just how large it is, fifth or fourth largest economy in the world. And when it comes to California, for a long, long time, they've kind of been, lack of a better term, drunk on their own success. Whether that's economic success, as I just mentioned, or a lot of different cultural and social success that have come out of it. A lot of there's a lot of parallels that you can draw to Western Europe in terms of values. Folks in California do value social and cultural impacts, and then environmental too, as we mentioned. Quite frankly, especially too after we saw some of the results last week, not all of the U.S. is focused on environmental impacts. And for California, it is definitely a priority, just because not only do we feel it, but we see it every day too as well. So for us, when we're talking about sporting events and the impacts that they're having, Those are all, key pillars for us to recognize. So as it relates down to the local level, we really have to be a jack of all trades to our different cities. So there's cities out there, small, tiny cities that I probably could name, but you guys have probably never heard of before in Orange County that are like, hey, we want people to know about us, who we are. We're trying to bring brand and recognition. A really good example of that actually is the city of Mission Viejo. Some of you have probably heard of is over at the Paris Olympics. And Mission Viejo really looks at it as that social and cultural impact. So over at the Paris Olympics, as I was just mentioning, they recently signed a deal with the Dutch Olympic Committee to be their training headquarters prior to LA 28. And City of Mission Viejo's, it's probably around 30 to 40,000 people living there, but there's a tremendous number of Olympians that have come out of there, as well as some of the venues that they have to train in, et cetera. So for them, it's less economic because they don't really have high taxes. They don't really have any hotel rooms that they're going to generate. But for them, it's just like, hey, the world knows about us now because the Dutch are going to be here. But then on the flip side, we have some other destinations. Let's say Anaheim, for example, which is very much a cash cow, being the home of Disneyland, where they're looking at sports, entertainment, just getting people in, visitors. There's a $4 billion redevelopment project around the Honda Center. So for them, it truly is about economic, as a lot of their city budget really depends on that year in and year out. So we have to listen to our partners and stakeholders of exactly what it is that they need and what they are trying to accomplish. Because there are some other destinations too that are very closed door and they don't want anybody coming. They don't want tourists. They don't want visitors. They live in a very perfect bubble, and I can't blame them. They have a very different approach than some others do. So we're in a very unique situation out here in Orange County compared to some of our other, whether you want to call them competitors or counterparts, throughout the country.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Now, Gergely, Professor mentioned how complex some of these and how robust the resources are in terms of developing comprehensive and cohesive impact studies. Now, similar to the strategies that Anthony talked about, do you, in your department, while I know it's not a department dedicated to impact studies, how do you assess your own strategies when selecting what types of impact studies that you want to move forward with, depending on potentially the size or location of the event?
I think it's really important to have the studies and to be able to be aware what is the value and what is the impact of our event. If we talk about environmental, economical, or social, I think these are the three main aspects we also really focus on, and we need to make sure that we are aware even by developing our events, we have to track it time to time. So having an economic impact study, what we have done 10 years ago or 5 years ago, probably is not applicable anymore. So we have to do it regularly, which I have to admit, we don't do it, I think, regularly enough, because if we go to a new city, they will ask what is the impact, how this will impact positively our cities, and of course we have different events. We have the World Championship when we bring around 5,000 athletes to a city, plus the entourage, plus the coaches, plus the family. That can be a big number, and we are talking about here age groupers. I saw that terminology on another slide here, I think from swimming or from another sport, but we are using it. So this is the mass participation. And of course they are coming for a week, spending a time, filling the hotels, etc. But in other events where we don't bring those mass of international tourists, maybe the event is more focusing on the locals, on the youth, and that's a totally different aspects of the impact of more on the social side. And of course, the environmental side, being an outdoor sport and using the environment, using the seas or the lakes and the outdoor environment, for us, it's just doubly important. So it doesn't matter what level of events. For us, it's really important to have that commitment and that measure of how much our organizers are committed to the environmental impact and environmental sustainability.
Great, thank you. Now, Professor Giovanni, Gergely just mentioned the importance of having up-to-date or recent impact studies, really to be able to prove or support the ROI of the events across different verticals. Now, I would love to hear your opinion or feedback that often these impact studies can yield varying results, particularly in economic and audience metrics. So from your point of view, are you able to explain the factors behind these differences? And what guidance would you offer both regions, cities, and federations on how to evaluate the reliability of these assessment reports?
So if I take the economic perspective, therefore, if I take the economic impact studies that are produced by different suppliers of this, let me say, services and this assessment, there are different methodologies that can be used in order to evaluate the impact of an event. Some methodologies are a little bit less conservative than other. And personally, based on the experience that I and the team with which I have collaborated have, we would always recommend more a conservative type of approach in order to, let me say, be relatively sure about the estimate being produced. These are estimates that must be communicated. And it is probably more important to arrive with a baseline amount of monetary value that has been generated than a maximum potential amount, which the level of, let me say, certitude is very, very low. I would prefer to communicate something that is maybe not less, let me say, not that sexy as a number, but on the other side, we are reliable, let me say, we are confident that that estimate is a decent approximation of what has been generated. Also, with the idea that if we are conservative, it is higher likely that the value of the event, the impact of the event is higher than this estimate. This is as a general principle. On top of this, I may say that in one of the key pillars of this, or at least of some of these methodologies, is to rely on something that is called a multiplier effect. That means you produce an inflow of money that basically is expanded into a specific territory by actors, by, imagine, hotels, restaurants, by, of course, any supplier of goods and services that operate in that sector, in that territory. And then, of course, these generate money that will be used by this sector for further transactions, therefore to pay for inputs that they need to provide further activities. This multiplier effect often is calculated by using multipliers that are really, let me say, estimated at high level. While we also have very strong econometric base way to estimate this multiplier in a more conservative way. So this is something that you often use by certain provider of these assessment services, and they just use multipliers that are realistically not considered that valid, but just with the aim to explode the estimate. That for communication point of view can be very positive, but then at the end when you have to justify, maybe after the event or after years after the event, what is the impact, then you find yourself in a difficult situation, difficult position. I don't know if I answer you.
No, that was great. Thank you. And maybe both for our regional and our international federation perspective, it seems that benchmarking against economic gains, there's frameworks, there's established frameworks. Like you said, there's measurement protocol, there's multiplier effects that can come into play. When we talk about benchmarking for social impact, while I know that's potentially a little bit more new in the matrix that you talked about, where we have economic, environmental, social, how, and perhaps all three of you could provide perspective on this, is how are you benchmarking against the social impact? And what does social impact mean for World Triathlon versus the region of Orange County?
If I can start, one of the social impact is how much people we can attract to engage with our events, which is very easy to measure by the first how many, like with the survey and also with the data what we have just out of the event, how many first timers, how many people came back, and then remeasure it when we go back to the same city, remeasure it, how many of them they stayed, how many new people came in. So it's a very easy and direct measurement of what is the social impact just locally of that event. And it's just an example. I'm sure that academia is much more robust on this one, but for us it's easy to measure.
Great.
You want to ask Anthony?
Sure, Anthony, if you want to provide a regional perspective on what measuring social impact means for you and or your cities that you work with.
Yes, so for us, it has been a little bit more of a struggle to come up with definite numbers or defined numbers when we talk about social impacts, because ultimately, it's about telling a story, and to those, whether it's the taxpayers or if it's politicians, etc., what is it exactly that they want to hear? So sometimes you have to look at finding those storylines. So like, can you tug on those heartstrings? I like to say in a lot of different ways. So it might be something where there's an element to the event that introduces a new sport to a demographic in Orange County that might not have accessibility to that specific sport. So let's say brown and black people that usually don't surf in Orange County from low-income communities. It's getting them out there to our beach communities to learn to surf, understand new sport, and hopefully become a lifelong passion. So is there some way that we can tie in a program that directly is attached to those championships, or it could even eventually be a legacy program in a lot of ways? There might be a certain sector that really cares about a specific cause. So what are we doing to help push forward that specific cause? So we've seen before. I bring up Mission Viejo again too. For them, it's that Olympic legacy. Just because their mayor at the time and city council member is an Olympian from 1976, gold medalist Brian Goodell. For him, that pulled on a lot of heartstrings because the Olympics is something near and dear to his heart that he wanted to have some kind of involvement once LA 28 comes around, and negotiating that deal was a big push for him with the Dutch Olympic Committee. So understanding what those are ultimately is how we express that agenda for that social dynamic. But in terms of some kind of calculator, that's something that we still haven't discovered yet, but it's becoming more and more important as we move forward.
So now it's back to me.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that now we are in a moment, let me say, we live in a period where the value of social activity is particularly high, as we are basically we come out from multiple crises, and we are still living across multiple crises at the macro global level, from COVID-19 to energy crisis, supply chain crisis, now of course political instabilities. This has led to society often being more polarized. Therefore, the value of social initiative now is probably higher than even 10 years ago, even 12 years ago. So it's probably very important for organizer to focus on how to measure social value that is produced. And we have a bunch of indicators that can be used, honestly. So we know that we can take it from multiple frameworks. Starting from, the S, the social dimension, is probably the most complex dimension of impact measurement, because it's the broader dimension encompassing so many different aspects. Think about employment quality, or just even the quality of the relation with volunteers, or think about product responsibility. That means even how you treat the data of spectators or anyway attendees, or think about security, health, or even of course relation with communities. So you should find, of course, a set of indicators. In my opinion, that there are a set of common indicators that can be used, and the OECD, as I said before, provide the first baseline list. But then each organization can develop also its own. What is important is to start and to keep basically this measurement on track, because then there is a lot of learning that organization get out of making this measurement analysis with a certain regularities, with certain frequencies.
Great, thank you. I know we are wrapping up our session. I just want to hear one last comment in terms of the future of impact assessment. From an international federation point of view, what does that look like from you? Where are you headed? And in terms of resources, what type of development does that look like?
As I said, I think at the beginning that I think it's a must. Without that, it's very difficult to approach new cities, new places. And what I just want to also mention, because Giovanni mentioned in his presentation, I think that we are talking about mostly the positive impacts, what the events, but also the negative impacts. And I think we have to be aware of the negative impacts of our events. If I start from my sport, like closing the roads in a city and multiple days, or closing the River Seine during the Olympics for a couple of days, for half a day every day, like all these these impacts, or just building a venue around businesses which then they have to close for a few days because they cannot operate normally, or just the environmental impact of bringing thousands and thousands of people to one location from all over the world. So there's so many of those impacts which has to be, I think, not just focus. We have to focus and we have to sell with the positives, but we have to make sure that we are aware of the negatives, and this is transparently clear for all our partners and stakeholders, for us to be able to give the full picture and to have a comprehensive picture.
Totally agree. And on top of this, I would add also the need to produce something that is an integrated, let me say, type of reporting of impact. There are anyway work that have been done on something that is called integrated reporting, that is basically a set of frameworks that help organization to produce in an integrative way what is the performance from multiple dimensions. But the idea, in my opinion, is when we are able to evaluate the impact of an event, we should try to have in a coherent way a scope that encompasses the three different dimensions. So having only an economic impact study probably is not enough. We should also have social impact being evaluated as well as the environmental impact.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, Anthony Gergelli, Professor Giovanni. Thank you so much for your time today, for your insights, for your presentation, and thank you all for your engaged enthusiasm through to the end of the day. We really appreciate your energy. Thank you so much.